Myst, Might, Mayhem. By Han Jung-Wioya. Chapter 68. True Meaning. Part 1. Inside a room with walls covered in talismans and numerous ritual instruments. A white-haired Taoist priest who had been meditating with his eyes closed inside a formation of candles arranged in the direction of the 5 elements opened his eyes. Shaking pupils. The sharp-featured white-haired Taoist priest couldn't hide his bewilderment. It can't be. The white-haired Taoist priest, gripped by a bad feeling, got up from his seat. Then he left the room and walked down the corridor. The feeling just now was the backlash that should have returned when the spell he had set up was broken. But that couldn't be. Even if the goo poison was completed, it couldn't have broken this chief's technique. Eventually, the white-haired Taoist priest stood in front of a door. The priest opened the door. The expression of the priest who opened the door stiffened. On the floor of the room was drawn what seemed to be a formation for a barrier, and inside it was a thick jar with a talisman attached and chains tied to it. However, tremble, tremble. As if anger had surged, the white-haired old man's beard trembled violently. And for good reason, as the talisman attached to the candle was torn off and the chains were severed. The old man approached closely and grabbed the severed chains with trembling hands. Then he closed his eyes and chanted a spell. Connecting the origin to the profound realm, the divine beings without masters, urgent as commanded. Tremble, tremble. The chains shook violently. Just what happened? Show me the reason. Swish, swish. Something was drawn in the mind of the old man with his eyes closed. It was the process of countless vengeful spirits devouring each other and transforming. On the days when the Corpse Blood Valley was conducted, he checked this periodically 2 or 3 times a day to see if there were any problems. Wasn't it just like that until now? But what on earth happened? At that moment, something completely black was seen approaching the goo poison that was being completed. The divine beings without masters, urgent as commanded. Show me. Just what is it? He needed to know what variable had occurred. As he infused more spell power through the incantation like that. Crack! At that moment, blood flowed from the old man's left eye, and the broken chains he was holding completely turned to powder and scattered. The old man momentarily staggered and was pushed back. What was that just now? Something vicious covered in the chi of death intervened with the goo poison that was being completed. It definitely wasn't an oddity in the form of a dead soul like a vengeful spirit. In that case, did a man-eating beast break through the talisman barrier of the cliff and enter? The old man wiped the blood tears flowing down with his sleeve. If it was a man-eating beast that could break the talisman of the cliff and touch a vengeful spirit that had transformed and risen in grade to that extent, even though it wasn't complete, it would surpass a monstrous beast. Could it be that a demonic beast or a devil beast appeared? No. A devil beast was too much. If it had reached that level, he would have noticed it right away no matter how far the distance was. If a devil beast appeared here, even if it was a martial sect, the sacrifice would have been considerable. Gore. But even if it wasn't that level of grade, he couldn't contain his anger. The goo poison that he had been trying to slowly complete over a span of 15 years had turned to foam in an instant. Bang! The old man roughly pushed open the door and left the building, passing through the corridor. Someone was seen kneeling there. It was none other than diviner Zhou Yuigong. As the old man emerged, Zhou Yuigong raised his head with a delighted face. Master, no, Pavilion Master. The sharp-featured white-haired old man. He was in Cook, the master of the primal killing, which was in charge of sorcery consultation under the Heaven and Earth Society. And he was also Zhou Yuigong's master and a sun level, one of only 14 diviners who had reached the highest level of sorcery. Excluding the 6 directions god, who was called the pinnacle among the divine sun-moon technique, he was a skilled practitioner who was unrivaled by anyone in sorcery. Pavilion Master. Are you reporting this to the society leader? At Zhou Yuigong's question, Pavilion Master in Cook shook his head with a terrifyingly stiff face. At this, Zhou Yuigong couldn't hide his disappointment. Among the talents he had seen so far, that guy was the best. That's why he was trying to get him out of the corpse blood valley no matter what, even by requesting the pavilion master. But it wasn't that his mind had changed. While that was happening, Inseok said, "That's not the problem right now." "What do you mean by that?" A high-grade man-eating beast sprinkled ashes on the fully cooked rice. "Don't tell me. This chief spirit god goo poison technique has been broken." Diviner Zhou Yuigong couldn't hide his shock. The spirit god goo poison technique was something his master-in-chief Inseok had devoted himself to for a whole 15 years, wasn't it? How can such a thing happen? No matter how much of a man-eating beast it is, breaking through the chief's barrier and entering, it means it's above a demonic beast. A demonic beast? A man-eating beast that surpasses the grade of a vicious beast and a monstrous beast. Even a monstrous beast requires at least sorcery to deal with, but if it's a demonic beast beyond that, it would be difficult to handle even for a diviner who has received the title of Bangwol, depending on the type. Wait a moment, the cliff valley where the spirit god goo poison technique is being performed. It was adjacent to the corpse blood valley. Even if the spirit god goo poison technique wasn't broken, if a demonic beast appeared on that mountain, it was a situation that couldn't be left unchecked. Pavilion Master Inseok clicked his tongue and said, "Immediately prepare talismans and ritual instruments and get ready to go to the corpse blood valley." At his master's order, diviner Zhou Yuigong thought to himself that it was fortunate. Although his master was upset because the spirit god goo poison technique was broken, this could be used as a justification to stop the barriers of the corpse blood valley. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Mok Jiangan entered reverse cycling to absorb the remaining death chi here. Seeing him like this, the eyes of Gyu Soha, who had become his new deity of gluttony, gleamed with interest. And for good reason, as in Gyu Soha's ghostly eyes, Mok Jiangan's chi was not circulating normally but in reverse. Not only that, he was circulating the chi of death, not the chi of yang or life. Is the master really a living human? That had been a question all along anyway. It was a strange thing for a human to accept that tremendous death chi and still be fine like this. Gyu Soha glanced to the side. Chong Ryong was sitting leisurely on a large rock, smoking a long pipe. At this, Gyu Soha carefully approached and opened her mouth. Ahem. Excuse me. Excuse me? Humph. Call me Eo. As she was about to tell the girl to call her Ierushin, respectful term for an elder, Chong Ryong stared intently at Soha and snorted, saying, "Just call me Yoni, older sister." Whether she was a green spirit or whatever, it was quite embarrassing to be called Ierushin by that young wench. Of course, even calling her Yoni had a huge gap in years and grade. However, this what? Are you going to impudently blurt out "this young master" again? This one is a man, yo. If you keep spouting nonsense, I'll just annihilate you whether that guy made you his deity of gluttony or not. No. This one is. Chong Ryong raised her long pipe with a snap. At this, Gyu Soha tightly closed her eyes and raised both hands upward. Although her half-white hair was peculiar, anyone would see her as a girl of about 15. Don't talk nonsense in front of me. TSK. If you utter one more word about being a man or whatever, I won't show any mercy. Chong Ryong clicked her tongue and waved her hand as if telling her to scram. In the end, Soha couldn't even ask what she wanted to ask and couldn't regain her pride. At that moment, Mok Jiangan opened his eyes as if he had finished absorbing all the chi. Phew. Did you absorb everything? Yes. Gathering the remaining chi was quite a lot. Gathering all the death chi remaining on the cliff, he was able to collect at least as much as killing about 50 people. It could be said to be much more efficient than hunting around the entire mountain. The chi has stabilized to some extent. Chong Ryong clicked her tongue inwardly while looking at Mok Jiangan. He finally made that much death chi his own through reverse cycling. The level of his middle and lower Danjian had almost reached the perfection of the peak realm in terms of internal energy, surpassing it to reach the extreme. It's absurd. The order was completely messed up. He had almost no understanding or enlightenment about Qi, so he didn't even know how to handle sword Qi or explosive force, but his internal energy level had reached the pinnacle of peak realm. This was also due to the strange profound principle of the destruction of thought in 8 forms. It's like the pinnacle of peak realm's energy had doubled. However, in the case of the middle Danjian, since it can only be obtained after surpassing the wall, its potential is also unknown. Right now, even she had difficulty definitively determining Mok Jiangun's exact level. She was certainly curious. Just how high-level experts this guy could handle. While that was happening, Mok Jiangun asked, "How much time has passed?" Since the master has been here. If you're asking how much time is left until dawn, there's not even an hour left. At most, about 3/4? Interrupting Gu Soha's words, Chang Ryong spoke. At her words, Mok Jiangun looked up at the night sky. Indeed, the sky that had been completely dark had somehow changed to a pale indigo color. Contrary to the plan, it seemed he had wasted a lot of time here. Of course, even so, it wasn't a loss. He had collected several times more death chi than killing the boys searching for flags, and he had even gained a green spirit with powerful strength. However, there wasn't much time left now. Mok Jiangun licked his lips. It's unfortunate. What is? I was trying to leave only 7, but 3/4 of an hour is too tight. At Mok Jiangun's words, Chang Ryong clicked her tongue. Anyway, his ideas were different. Originally, the purpose was to secure more death chi, but now it seemed that it wasn't just that, but also to drastically reduce the total number of people. Chang Ryong, who had been clicking her tongue, said, "Instead of that, you should find the flag and teammates first." If he was simply looking for a flag, it would be fine, but he had to find the one with the other half of the sword technique mnemonic written on it. If he was unlucky, he might only find flags with the same mnemonics. And he also needed guys who were worth accepting as teammates. So he had to hurry. At that moment, Mok Jiangun took something out of his bosom. "What are you doing when you're busy?" "I have to insert it again." What Mok Jiangun took out was none other than the needles of the Golden Gate lock that he had removed from the acupoints of his spine. If he didn't insert them again, it would arouse suspicion. "I can do that for you." "Pardon?" Whoosh. As soon as the questioning ended, Chang Ryong lightly waved her hand. Then the needles of the Golden Gate lock on Mok Jiangun's palm flew and simultaneously pierced the meridian points on his spine. Puck puck puck. Hiss. Inserting the needles was painful, just like removing them. It hurts to insert even one, but inserting them simultaneously like this, even Mok Jiangun, who had strong endurance for pain, couldn't help but let out a loud breath. Seeing this, Chang Ryong spoke with a satisfied expression. "I can do this much for you, although a tool is needed to remove them." "But you?" Chang Ryong's gaze turned towards Mok Jiangun's chest. That was near where his middle Danjian was located. Unlike the lower Danjian that was cut off and scattered when the meridians were blocked, the middle Danjian was still alive. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Like that, after quarter an hour, Mok Jiangun discovered a group that had secured a flag. There were exactly 8 of them, and they seemed to have successfully defended the flag a couple of times, as the corpses of 9 boys were scattered around. A boy who recognized Mok Jiangun immediately laughed and said upon discovering him, "Hey! Where did you sell your teammates and why are you wandering alone?" "Ha ha 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 ha. That's right." At his question, the teammates with him all sneered in unison. They showed this attitude because they were confident that Mok Jiangun alone couldn't handle them as dawn was not far away. After laughing together like that, the boy who provoked Mok Jiangun waved his hands and said, "We're full here, so get lost." "You're full here. Are you deaf?" I said get lost quickly. "Ah, right. There's only about 2 left until dawn, so I don't know if you can even find a group worth accepting. Thud. Irk. Thump. At that moment, the boy collapsed in the middle of his speech. Mok Jayangan was in a posture of having thrown something, and a rock was embedded in the center of the boy's face. He seemed to have died instantly after being hit by it. What is this? How is this possible when we can't even use internal energy? The boys who were the boy's teammates couldn't hide their bewilderment. Who would have imagined that he would kill a teammate just by throwing a mere rock? While that was happening, Mok Jayangan raised the corners of his mouth and smirked. Oh dear. A spot opened up in your group. Chapter 69. True Meaning. Part 2. There's an empty spot in that garden. The boys were dumbfounded by Mok Jayangan's mocking words. Who could have predicted that someone would throw a rock and kill a teammate in such an urgent situation? Mok Jayangan spoke again to the shocked boys. What will you do? The boys were at a loss for words at this question. At most, there were only 2 hours left until sunrise. If they were lucky and someone showed up, they could replace the dead boy. But if no one appeared... Damn it. What should we do? The boys muttered softly. They were angry that a boy who had shared life and death with them had died, but they had to think rationally. They couldn't fully blame him, as he too had made what he thought was the right decision. There are still 2 hours left. That's true, but what if no one comes? He's right. Let's just accept him. But... do you think that guy will give up? Still, even if it's just this once, we have a sense of loyalty to this guy who's been with us. At that moment, they saw Mok Jayangan picking up another rock. He wasn't just picking up one, but grabbing as many as he could hold. The boy who was speaking swallowed dryly and said, "Let's accept him. That bastard picked up rocks. That crazy bastard." If they didn't accept him, he looked ready to throw rocks at the other boys too. In the end, they had no choice but to accept Mok Jayangan as a teammate. Mok Jayangan smiled brightly as if nothing had happened and said, "Thanks everyone. You're all so kind. Son of a bitch." They all cursed Mok Jayangan inwardly. If only he hadn't shown up now, they could have gotten a result satisfactory to everyone. They had learned what teamwork was by uniting as one. But now, they had to begrudgingly accept this crazy bastard in order to pass the gate. Swoosh! At that moment, Mok Jayangan placed his hand on the flagpole. One boy suppressed his emotions as much as possible and said, "Be careful. Even with 2 hours left, the flag must remain intact." I know. If you know, then don't touch it. Despite the boy's words, Mok Jayangan didn't stop touching the flag. The boy was angry but couldn't say anything more. Seeing the monstrous strength Mok Jayangan displayed in the steel bead competition and how he almost pierced someone's face with a rock just now, the boy didn't have the confidence to pick a fight. Let's see what happens once the Golden Gate lock are released. According to the information, the Golden Gate lock would be removed once they got past the initial part of the gate. When that happened, he was determined to deal with this guy one way or another. As he was thinking this, Mok Jayangan opened his mouth. By the way, did you find any other flags besides this one? Other flags? The boy shook his head at Mok Jayangan's question. They had been lucky. After finding this flag, 2 teams had attacked them, but they had defended it to the end. We never lost and protected this flag. The boy spoke with pride in his voice. At this, Mok Jayangan sighed. Phew. What? What's with that sigh? You lost not only your flag but also your teammates. One boy finally couldn't hold back and confronted Mok Jayangan about this. Then Mok Jayangan shook his head and approached the boy. The boy flinched for a moment but then stood his ground. What? What are you trying to do? Are you in a bad mood? But it's the truth. And although we had no choice but to accept you, to pass the gate, fighting is unnecessary, at least. Smack. Crack. At that moment, the boy's neck was twisted. Without finishing his words, the boy collapsed with his life extinguished. The other boys were stunned. This crazy bastard, is he really insane? No matter what, this is too much. The sun will rise soon, so what will we do if you kill a teammate like this? Are you in your right mind? Thwack. Crack. At that moment, Mok Jaeongun's hand struck the neck of the shouting boy. With the sound of muscles and bones snapping, the boy's neck was bent at an angle as he let out a dying groan and passed away. Having already killed two, the boys couldn't hide their consternation. He's lost it. What the hell is he doing? Did he really have no intention of passing the gate? As they were thinking this, Mok Jaeongun reached out towards another one of them. Smack. Eek. One boy was caught, unable to dodge in time. The other boys' minds went blank. The only thought in their heads was that in order to survive, they had to run away no matter what. So without helping the captured boy, they fled. Mok Jaeongun threw a rock with all his might at one of the fleeing boys. Thwack. Irk. The flying rock pierced through the back of the head of one of the running boys. Naturally, the boy who was hit in the head died and collapsed on the spot. Thud. Mok Jaeongun picked up another rock, but the remaining three had already scattered and entered the bushes. Getting all of them will be tough. Then, just deal with two of them for me. With those words, Mok Jaeongun threw a rock with full force towards the bushes. From within the bushes, a scream of anguish was heard, followed by the sound of someone collapsing. It seemed he had hit his mark. The captured boy, trembling with fear, said, "Why are you doing this? You know what will happen if we can't pass the gate. If you kill teammates like this, you guys won't be able to pass anyway." What? I said you won't pass. What kind of nonsense is that? If only you hadn't done this. You were so focused on protecting it that you didn't properly examine the flag. What are you? Smack. Mok Jaeongun grabbed the confused boy's head with both hands. The boy begged for his life. Spare. Crack. But Mok Jaeongun snapped his neck without changing his expression. Then, grabbing the pole of the flag stuck in the ground, he crumpled it with one hand and muttered. Crunch. Things have gotten a bit pressing. There was only 1 hour left. In that time, he had to find a different type of flag. The characters engraved on this flag were identical to the ones Mok Jaeongun had memorized. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Same time, halfway up the mountain. With not much time left until sunrise, two teams were facing off in a battle. Huff. Huff. Rough breathing could be heard from all around, as everyone seemed exhausted. Peculiarly, this confrontation was particularly different from other typical flag defense battles. That's because both sides had flags. One side had firmly planted their flag into the blocked mountain wall and formed a semicircular formation to protect it, while the other side had two people guarding their flag as they carried it around, with the remaining 6 targeting the semicircular formation. This isn't good. On the defending side were Mo Harang of the Demon Fire Hall and Mok Yucheon, the youngest of the Yun Mok Sword Matter. Mo Harang, who had set out to find a new flag, somehow ended up joining Mok Yucheon's team and had been defending the flag until now. Seeing how bright the sky had gotten, there wasn't much time left until sunrise. If they were lucky and someone showed up, they could replace the dead boy. But if no one came... Damn it. Mok Yucheon cursed inwardly as he glared at the opposing team. The shirtless boy wielding a stone axe with unique patterns all over his body was Yeom Jie of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave. That bastard. Mok Yucheon glared at him and cursed inwardly. He didn't understand why they were targeting the flag. Because one of the boys guarding the flag had a broken flagpole tucked into his belt. That meant they already found both types, so why are they doing this? It was completely incomprehensible. If they kept fighting like this and even one teammate was taken out, they would fail the gate. Taking on such a risk just to reduce their numbers by one seemed like a foolish decision. Mok Yucheon whispered quietly to the boys next to him and Mo Harang. "Let's hold out just a little longer." At those words, the boys and Mo Harang nodded. Once the sun rose, this kind of behavior would become meaningless. However, Yeongjie of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave faction sneered at their strategy. "You think you can just hold out?" If that's what they thought, it was a miscalculation. They had a surefire strategy. It had already been proven effective by wiping out 3 teams using this giant wolf monster. Yeongjie raised his left hand. Then, "Wah wah wah. Ya wah." The 2 boys guarding the flag suddenly began screaming loudly. Not only them, but the boys who were fighting also raised their voices and shouted even louder. "What the? Crazy! Why are they suddenly doing that?" The defending side couldn't understand why they were acting this way. They were screaming way too loudly. Since they were halfway up the mountain, their shouts echoed through the surroundings. What kind of ploy is this? Mo Harang of the Demon Fire Hall glared at Yeongjie of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave, who was smirking. As soon as that scrawny bastard raised his hand, they started doing this. There had to be an ulterior motive behind it. In the end, she decided she couldn't just leave him be. Rather than simply focusing on defending the flag, she thought it would be better to kill 1 or 2 of them. That would make them back off. She gripped her sharply honed stone dagger tightly and said in a low voice, "Don't any of you step outside the semicircular formation, no matter what." "What, you can't mean?" Mok Yucheon urgently tried to dissuade her, but... Swoosh! Mo Harang had already dashed towards one of the boys. Although her energy points were blocked, everyone knew of her incredible dagger skills that defied imagination for a woman. So when she made her move, they stepped back to maintain distance. This was the moment. "I've been waiting for this." Yeongjie of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave didn't miss this opening and charged at the boys forming the semicircular formation. Mo Harang changed directions in response. I knew it. She had also anticipated this. She was the strongest one among them. She figured someone like Yeongjie would try to lure her away before targeting the semicircular formation. Whoosh! Mo Harang threw her sharply honed stone dagger at Yeonga's back as he was running. Then one of the boys from Yeonga's team threw himself to block it. Stab! Irk! The stone dagger lodged between the boy's left chest and shoulder. But thanks to this, Yeongjie was able to swing his stone axe down at the head of one of the boys in the semicircular formation without hindrance. No. At that moment, Mok Yucheon slid and aimed for Yeonga's legs. Yeongjie chuckled at this and threw his body to the side, hurling the stone axe. Huh? Yeonga's real target wasn't the boys. This is bad. It was none other than the flag they were protecting. The hurled stone axe spun as it flew towards the flagpole. It was sheer luck. The stone axe grazed the flagpole and bounced off. Although it got a little nicked, thankfully the flagpole didn't break because it was only grazed. Seeing this, the boys felt relieved. Phew. If that had snapped, they would have had to switch from defending the flag to trying to take the flag from them at all costs. I'll kill him. Swoosh. Tap tap tap. Mo Harang of the Demon Fire Hall dashed towards Yeongjie. Compared to the other guys, this one in particular had to die now. He was the most troublesome, using his wits and not hesitating to resort to any means necessary. Demon Fire Hall girl. Are you saying you want to take me on? Yeongjie, who had rolled and gotten back up after throwing the axe, took a fighting stance as Mo Harang charged at him. Putting aside the fact that she was a girl, she was one of the opponents he most wanted to face off against. Right at that moment. Thump. Thump. A strange sound was heard from somewhere. The 2 people who were charging at each other stopped in their tracks. The boys from the 2 sides who had been confronting and fighting also stopped. Thud. Thud. The sound of the ground shaking. It felt like something massive was approaching. The day had brightened considerably, so they could see a giant shadow forming between the bushes. Then the boys on Yeonga's side moved in unison as if they had been waiting for this. They ran towards the two boys who had the flag, as if taking shelter. Rustle, rustle. At that moment, a massive creature appeared from behind them. Everyone's faces stiffened. Slurp. The creature that appeared, drooling profusely. It had blue fur on its head, pointed ears, and sharp hook-shaped claws. Its appearance resembled a wolf, but its size. What is that? What the hell is this? It looked nearly 3 times larger than an ordinary wolf. It was a monster that seemed like it could swallow even an ox whole in one bite, emanating a tremendous pressure. Seeing this, Mok Yucheon broke out in a cold sweat. It got even bigger. While wandering the mountain and struggling, he had encountered that monster. He was lucky to survive it, but compared to when he saw it then, it had gotten much bigger. What on earth happened in the meantime? That's the monster wolf. Another boy who had been on the same team as Mok Yucheon spoke in a voice filled with fear. 2 of their teammates had fallen victim to that thing, so they knew better than anyone how dangerous it was. Tap tap tap. At that moment, Yeonjie ran and stuck close to where their flag was. Seeing this, the boys forming the semicircular formation on Mo Harang's side had puzzled expressions. They were closer to that monster than Mo Harang's team. In this situation where they should abandon the flag and flee for their lives, they were sticking close to the flag as if determined to defend it at all costs. What's going on? As they were finding this strange, the unthinkable happened. Swoosh! The monster wolf, which they thought would attack Yeonga's team first, avoided them and moved. And then, it approached not Mo Harang and the boys forming the semicircular formation in front of the mountain wall, but Mok Yucheon and the boys? What the? Why? They couldn't fathom the reason. Why was that monster passing them by and targeting Mo Harang's team? Was it discriminating between people? The flag? But there was one person who roughly guessed the reason. It was none other than Mo Harang. Mo Harang found it odd that despite the appearance of such a monster, they weren't on guard and instead stuck close to their flag. So on a hunch, she shouted, "Stick close to the flag." At that moment, the monster wolf charged at them, who were backing up towards the flag, at a tremendous speed that didn't match its massive body. Ah! Eek! Ah, run! Everyone frantically threw themselves aside as the monster wolf charged, regardless of whether they were close to the flag or not. However, one boy ended up getting trampled by the monster wolf. Thud! Ack! Blood spewed from the trampled boy's mouth. Not only was the weight of that giant body a factor, but the hook-shaped claws dug into his back and tore his internal organs. Damn it! Seeing this, Mok Yucheon twisted his body, stopping mid-escape. His instincts were telling his legs to run away, but that boy had accepted him as a teammate and they had shared life and death together. That's why he couldn't just abandon him and flee. Smack! Mok Yucheon picked up a rock from the ground and threw it at the monster's face. Thwack! The monster wolf, hit in the face with the rock, jerked its head around. Quick-eek! Quick-eek! It let out a pig-like squeal, and the moment they heard it, goosebumps shot up all over their bodies. The monster wolf stared directly at Mok Yucheon. Damn it! Had he done something foolish? Should he have just run away instead? Right as he was thinking this. Swoosh! At that moment, someone leaped high, landed on the monster wolf's back, climbed up to its neck, and tried to drive a sharply honed stone dagger into its eye. It was none other than Mo Harang. However, swipe! Before Mo Harang's dagger could pierce its eye, the monster wolf violently swiped at the area above its head with the opposite front paw. She tried to jump off and dodge, but it grazed her back. Flesh was torn from her back where it was caught by the hook-shaped claws, and blood instantly soaked her back. And then, thud thud thud. She tumbled several times. Harang! After tumbling, Mo Harang staggered and tried to get up. But having suffered such an injury with her energy points sealed and no protection, it was nearly impossible for her to easily get back on her feet. Thud. One of her knees sank to the ground. Seeing this, Yonga's teammates huddled around their flag and laughed mockingly, feeling elated. Was this what they called borrowed murder? They had already turned 3 teams into food for that monster wolf using this method. Don't feel too resentful, Demon Fire Hall wench. Yong-Jie of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave curled his lips into a cruel smile. Here. There was no such thing as being fair and square. The true winner was the one who survived till the end by any means necessary and eliminated their rivals. Growl growl. The monster wolf walked towards her, baring its fangs. It wasn't a simple beast. As if intending to fill her with terror, this monster wolf was slowly taking one step at a time. Huff, huff. The sun will rise soon. Emo Harang bit her lower lip as she looked up at the sky. With only about an hour left, was she going to lose her life like this without passing the gate? Her vision was blurring from the blood loss from her back. Thud. 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 The monster wolf approached right in front of her. Mok Yuchion and another boy could be seen shouting and desperately trying to distract it, but it was too late. This monster wolf's next prey was her. Do I look tasty to you? Grit. Emo Harang clenched her teeth and tried to stand up. Even if she died, she thought she had to stab this monster wolf's flesh at least once so she wouldn't die feeling resentful. Right at that moment, as if it had been waiting, the monster wolf tried to throw itself at her. Swoosh. Come. That's when it happened. Smack. The monster wolf's body suddenly stopped mid-lunge. Rather than stopping of its own will, it was as if it was bound by something, with its 2 front paws lifted and fixed in place. She had no idea what was going on. What? What's happening to it? As everyone looked on in bewilderment, something bizarre appeared in Emo Harang's blurring vision. Numerous chains had burst out from the ground and were restraining the monster wolf's entire body. Clang! Clang! Quick-eek! The monster wolf howled and tried to break free, but the chains constricted it even more tightly, preventing it from moving. What on earth were these chains? As she was wondering this, a voice was heard from somewhere. Ah! What a relief! To think everything I need is gathered here. At that voice, she turned her head. There, she saw someone walking over with the corners of his mouth turned up. That guy is. It was none other than Mok Jiangan. But right next to him, what was that transparent yet blurry figure? Shudder. It was a girl with chains wrapped around her entire body and half her hair white. The moment their eyes met, goosebumps shot up all over Emo Harang's body. Chapter 70. True Meaning. Part 3. The giant monster wolf, frozen in a posture as if about to leap at Emo Harang of the Demon Fire Hall. Everyone's eyes widened at this bizarre sight. Then, a voice was heard from within the bushes. Ah! What a relief! To think everything I need is gathered here. Everyone's gaze turned in that direction. That guy? The person emerging from the bushes was none other than Mok Jiangan. Because he had left such a strong impression with his brutal tactics in the steel bead competition, everyone recognized him at a glance. And, as I thought, he was alive. Mok Yuchion looked at Mok Jiangan and let out a sigh of relief without realizing it. Although he disliked the guy, he didn't wish for him to die in a place like this deep down. So he felt relieved, but the timing of his appearance was bad. You idiot! What happened to your teammates and why did you show up alone? They were supposed to find the flag and have all 8 members waiting until sunrise. But of all times, he showed up alone leisurely when that monster wolf was rampaging here. His luck was truly rotten. However, now was not the time to worry about that guy. Tap 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 tap. Mok Yuchion ran towards Emo Harang. He didn't know why that monster wolf was acting like this, but now was the chance to save her. At that moment, Yong-Jie of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave shouted, "Hey! You crazy monster wolf! What are you doing right now?" Yong-Jie didn't care whether Mok Jiangnan appeared or not. He didn't know why the monster wolf that had been moving well according to their strategy suddenly couldn't move in that posture, but he hoped it would hurry up and kill them. That's why he was shouting. Quick-eek! However, contrary to his wishes, the monster wolf howled but couldn't budge an inch. Its fur that had been standing up as if restrained by something was pressed down. What the hell is it doing? As he was getting frustrated. Swoosh! Mok Yuqian slid and pushed Mo Harang, who was right in front of the monster wolf, out of the way. And he caught her shoulders as she fell forward. Get a grip. Mok Yuqian urged Mo Harang, who had a blank expression. Then she spoke. Do you see this? See what? She was gesturing towards the monster wolf with her eyes. Of course he could see it. He didn't know why it was acting like this, but it couldn't move at all. But then, incomprehensible words came out of her mouth. It's bound by chains. Mok Yuqian furrowed his brows. What on earth was she talking about? What chains? Why was she saying such nonsense? Ah. Mok Yuqian bit his lip as he felt the wetness on her back. It seemed she was seeing things due to excessive blood loss and faintness. Mo Harang. Get a grip. We've endured until now, but if you collapse here, it's death. I'm still conscious. Then walk. Mok Yuqian hoisted her shoulders and urged her on. Then she looked in Mok Jiang'an's direction with an expression that said she couldn't understand at all. Was she really seeing things because of severe blood loss? But something felt off. Who was that half-white-haired girl with a blurry form next to him that didn't seem human? As she was wondering this, she saw the half-white-haired girl moving her lips. Seeing this, her pupils trembled. As someone from the Demon Fire Hall, once known as the Four Great Assassins, she had learned lip reading. Lip reading was a technique to read the other person's conversation through the movements of the lips, face, and tongue. She could see it. That person seems to be able to see me? At those words, a chill ran down Mo Harang's spine for a moment. Then she saw Mok Jiang'an also muttering while looking at her with an intrigued expression. Oh, is that so? Mo Harang became confused. Was she really seeing things due to blood loss? But why were that blurry existence and Mok Jiang'an conversing? Right then. Quiek! At the tremendous howl that spread like a shockwave, Mo Harang, Mok Yuqian, no, all the boys covered their ears in pain. Irk. What is that sound? It was a howl no different from a lion's roar imbued with inner force. And with the howl, the ground the monster wolf was standing on shook nearly 5. Jang and sank in. Rumble, rumble. At that moment, the frozen monster wolf moved. Yes. That's how it should be. Yong-Jie of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave, covering his ears, inwardly cheered. In any case, since they were within the protection range of this flag, it didn't matter to them, but the other guys didn't have that advantage. So they had to die here. Damn it. A rough sound escaped from Mok Yuqian, who was supporting her shoulders. He thought now was the chance, but it seemed he was wrong. Right at that moment. Clang, 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 clang. Dozens of chains burst out not from right below but from around 5 zhang away, once again restraining the body of the monster wolf, no, the demon wolf. Quiek. This time, perhaps because the restraining force was too strong. Thud. The chains tangled and pulled, smashing the demon wolf's head into the ground. Huh? To the baffled Mok Yuqian, Mo Harang said, You really can't see it? What are you talking about? At a time like this, before he could even finish his words, Mok Jiang'an had already approached the demon wolf pressed against the ground, unable to move its chin, no, its entire body. Then, I should repay you for targeting what's mine, right? With those words, he grabbed the demon wolf's upper teeth with both hands, pressed the inside of its mouth with his foot, and Riyayip. He tore its palate. The demon wolf, whose mouth was forcibly opened, thrashed its body and tried to twist its head as if in pain, but the chain's restraining force was too strong for it to move. Thanks to that. Rip rip rip. Quick eek. Its mouth was completely torn off. The demon wolf's wailing as it shed bloody tears also stopped as if nothing had happened once the upper part of its head was completely ripped off. Mok Yucheon, who was closest to this scene, and everyone else were at a loss for words. Who could have imagined that the monster wolf that had devoured so many boys would end up like this in an instant? This bastard, what the hell? Mok Yucheon was the most shocked. Was this really the same cowardly guy he knew? Mok Jaeyonan tossed aside the torn upper snout and head of the demon wolf. Thud. There was a thud sound, perhaps due to the weight of the bones. Phew. The surroundings fell into silence at the sight of Mok Jaeyonan drenched in the demon wolf's blood that spurted out as its snout was torn in two. What the hell was with this guy? Why did this monster wolf become unable to move and die like this as soon as this bastard appeared? Moreover, what was that strength to tear its mouth off when inner force was sealed and unusable? Everyone couldn't hide their confusion. However, there was one person who quickly snapped out of it. Damn it. It was Yeomjie of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave. He too was equally shocked by this unbelievable outcome. But how the situation came to be wasn't important. The sun would rise soon. They had to defend the flag no matter what, so they needed to retreat right now. Yeomjie whispered to his teammates. We have to fall back. His teammates understood this too, so they carefully tried to lift the iron lump of the flag. But right at that moment, bind them all. As soon as Mok Jaeyonan muttered softly, clang 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 clang. Chains rose from the ground, instantly restraining the bodies of everyone present. Clink. What is this? Something is restraining my body? The restrained boys couldn't hide their consternation. Although invisible, everyone could feel something like a rope, no, cold chains binding them. They had no idea what was going on. Aarg. Yeomjie of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave tried to break free with all his might. However, with his inner force sealed in the first place, and no matter how much he had trained his outer force, his strength couldn't surpass that of the monstrous demon wolf. Naturally, this attempt was nothing more than a waste of energy. Thud. Trying to force it, his body tilted forward and his knees sank to the ground. Yeomga's face flushed with humiliation. You son of a bitch, what the hell did you do? As this was happening, Mok Jaeyonan approached the flag right in front of the mountain wall. The eyes of the boys who had been defending it but fled trembled. Could it be that he was targeting their flag? As they were thinking this, Mok Jaeyonan examined the flagpole and then... Ah. This one too. He muttered and then broke the flagpole without any hesitation. Snap. Nuo. Why you bastard? The boys screamed as if wailing. Although they had abandoned the flag and fled to escape the monster wolf, if that was gone, they would be eliminated from this gate. But they didn't expect Mok Jaeyonan to damage it like that. Grit. You son of a bitch. Mok Yucheon also couldn't contain his anger and called out to Mok Jaeyonan. He wanted to run over and punch him in the face right away. But his body was restrained by something invisible and he couldn't move an inch. This won't do either. Mok Jaeyonan clicked his tongue and this time approached where Yeomjie was. At this, Yeomjie shouted with bulging veins in his neck. Are you going to break this one too? In response to that question, Mok Jaeyonan chuckled and shook his head. Then he examined the flagpole and frowned. Don't tell me this one too? Although the people around couldn't hear it, Mok Jaeyonan could hear Chang Ryang's voice in his ears. As she suspected, the characters were identical this time as well. Mok Jaeyonan licked his lips as if troubled. What a coincidence. He didn't expect all three flags he found to have the same characters he had memorized. Now the sun was truly about to rise at any moment. Even if he hurried, there wasn't enough time to secure a flag. What will you do? Command that Soha girl to search for flags nearby right now. At those words, Mok Jayangan was about to nod, but then thought of another method. Come to think of it, wouldn't it be better to confirm this first? Mok Jayangan was about to ask Yeom Jie and his teammates, who were bound by Soha's chains and unable to move. By any chance? Before he could even start his question, someone shouted at that moment. I'll tell you the remaining characters, so let's make a deal. At those words, Mok Jayangan turned his head towards the one who shouted. The one who shouted was none other than Mo Harang of the Demon Fire Hall. Although her face was so pale, she was somehow still breathing and mustering her remaining strength. Mok Jayangan looked at her with intrigue. It seems you figured it out. I checked it twice. Even she had thought Mok Jayangan breaking their flag they were defending was simply to forcefully eliminate them from the gate. However, seeing him frown while examining the flag of Yeonga's team, she realized it. Mok Jayangan was searching for a different type of flag. Characters? Yeom Jie also belatedly realized this fact at her words. So he hurriedly shouted at Mok Jayangan. Let's make a deal. A deal? Yeah. I also know the other characters, and we even have an intact flag and teammates here. It looks like you don't have teammates, but if you join us, you can pass too. Yeom Jie thought this was fortunate. At first, he was angry because his strategy was ruined because of this guy. But in the end, this bastard played the role of that monster wolf for them. He broke their flag for them, so if they just accepted this guy, the Demon Fire Hall bunch would naturally be eliminated. At that moment, one of the boys said in a fluster. Wait a minute. We're all fine. If we accept that guy. Shut up. Yeom Jie reprimanded the boy. Then he said to Mok Jayangan. I'll take care of one guy myself, so will you make the deal or not? You need teammates, flag, and characters anyway, don't you? He probably wouldn't be able to refuse anyway. It was more rational for them to make such a clear proposal. But then, Mok Jayangan reached for the waist of one of the boys. Grab! It was the broken flagpole. The characters are here. At this, Yeom Jie was momentarily taken aback. Carrying around the pole with the other set of characters written on it had backfired. A few of them hadn't memorized it all, so he didn't dispose of it, but who knew it would turn out like this? Yeom Jie hurriedly said. That's ours too. So you'll make a deal with us, right? Huh? Who? This is mine. Mok Jayangan nonchalantly said while waving the flag he had taken. Seeing this, veins bulged on Yeonga's forehead. You. And this flag here is also mine. Mok Jayangan lifted the flag with one hand. At this, the boy's eyes widened. Even with their inner force sealed, it took two of them to barely lift it, but he lifted it so easily. Mok Jayangan moved away from them, holding the flag with a satisfied expression. Stop. I said it's mine. At Mok Jayangan's mockery, Yeom Jie got angry but barely suppressed it and said, Why you still need teammates? Ah. That's right. Mok Jayangan nodded as if convinced. Then this time, Mok Yucheon, who was supporting Mo Harang of the Demon Fire Hall, shouted. Mok Jayangan, don't trust that cowardly and weak bastard. They'll stab you in the back. If that's the case, accept us as teammates instead. He shouted on her behalf as Mo Harang's condition worsened. In fact, he didn't want to ask Mok Jayangan due to his pride, but there was no other way. Once the sun rose, everything would be over. To survive, he had to abandon his pride. At that moment, Yeom Jie also shouted. What bullshit are you spouting? Everything this guy collected was what we defended. What have you bastards done to demand to be accepted? You have the nerve to run your mouth after doing such cowardly things, even using a monster like that without any skill? Mok Jayangan. Ignore what that guy says and... Hey. No, did you say Mok Jayangan? If you help me this time, I will definitely repay the favor. There are still gates left, so being indebted to me, someone from Vermilion Slaughter Cave, shouldn't be bad. Don't listen to him. Although we may be half-brothers, shut up, you bastard. Then at some point, everyone started shouting at Mok Jae-eun, who was holding the flag, pleading to be accepted as his teammates. Their voices mixed together, making it confusing to tell who was who. Right at that moment. Clap clap. Mok Jae-eun clapped his hands. At this, everyone's gaze turned to Mok Jae-eun. Since he was the one holding their lifeline here, they had no choice but to focus on him. As they looked at him, Mok Jae-eun opened his mouth. This is quite a dilemma. With everyone wanting to join me like this, I'd like to accept all of you as teammates if I could, but rules are rules. Gulp. The boy swallowed dryly. It seemed he had made a decision on who to accept as teammates. Mok Yucheon stared intently at Mok Jae-eun. No matter how much they disliked each other, brothers were still brothers. He inwardly hoped that in the end, he would accept him as a teammate. But then, in a situation like this, it seems unfair to prioritize and look after certain individuals. So let's do this instead. Mok Jae-eun glanced to the side and nodded his head. Then, huh? My body? The bodies of the restrained boys moved. Mok Jae-eun smiled brightly at them and said, kill each other. What? I'll accept the 7 of you who survive as my teammates. In an instant, everyone's expression stiffened. Chapter 71. True Meaning. Part 4. I'll accept the 7 of you who survive as my teammates. The boys, who had been tensely waiting to see who Mok Jae-eun would choose as his teammates, were dumbfounded for a moment by the words that came out of his mouth. He was telling them to kill each other when the sun was about to rise? This bastard? Seriously. From their perspective, they couldn't help but be furious. In the first place, they had stayed up all night until now to defend the flag. But he suddenly appeared and was toying with the situation as if pulling out an embedded stone. No, it was even worse than that. Are you seriously? Mok Yucheon, who had momentarily flared up like the others and tried to express his anger to Mok Jae-eun. However, the moment he saw Mok Jae-eun's face, he became speechless. Huh. That face with the corners of his mouth raised up to his ears was enjoying this situation. It was far from the feeling of a joke. It was a face that seemed to genuinely wish for them to kill each other. Shudder. With that realization, goosebumps spread from Mok Yucheon's spine to his entire body. Rather than questioning whether this guy was really that Mok Jae-eun, it felt like he was looking at an existence filled with genuine evil. At that moment, Mok Jae-eun opened his mouth. You have too much leisure. The sun seems like it will rise soon. The horizon in the eastern sky that Mok Jae-eun was pointing at with his hand was dyed in crimson. Everyone's expressions turned grave. It really seemed like the sun would rise soon. Damn it. Do we really have to do as that bastard says? Right at that moment. One boy couldn't contain his anger and finally charged at Mok Jae-eun, shouting. You son of a bitch. The stone axe that Yeom Jie of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave had thrown was gripped in the boy's hand. The boy, whose eyes had gone wild, didn't care about the sun rising or not. It was an impulsive action, feeling like he had to smash Mok Jae-eun's head with this stone axe to vent his anger. However. Clang. Huh? The boy's body froze, restrained by chains just 3 steps away from Mok Jae-eun. This is an alien sensation, as if his whole body was bound. Although nothing was visible, it was incomprehensible. At that moment, the green-souled Gyu Soha, who was reaching out her hand towards the boy, spoke in a chilling voice. Master. Shall I kill him? Mok Jae-eun shook his head at this. It wouldn't be bad for Gyu Soha to kill him, but there was no need to reveal that the spirit devourer had reached a level capable of killing someone yet. Therefore. Thud thud thud. Let me go. This isn't right. The boy restrained by Gyu Soha's chains seemed to have regained his senses, trembling with a pale face. At this, Mok Jae-eun snatched the stone axe the boy was holding and raised it as if he would strike him down at any moment. The boy pleaded in terror. Eek. I was wrong. I'll do as you say. You heated up like an iron pot and cooled down quickly. Please spare me. Then you should have targeted someone other than me. With those words, Mok Jayanun brought the stone axe down on the boy's head. Splat. Irk. A grotesque scream flowed from the mouth of the boy whose head was crushed. The expressions of the other boys watching this scene were a sight to behold. They too had killed other boys to survive from the first gate until now, but that was ultimately murder for a purpose. However, Mok Jayanun's actions had a different nature. See crazy bastard. It seemed like he was enjoying the act of killing itself. A prime example was smiling so brightly while looking at the boy dying brutally with his head crushed, which was completely out of the ordinary. Overwhelmed by the pressure, the boys no longer had any thoughts of trying to do something to Mok Jayanun. That was completely out of their league. With the situation turning out like this, the first one to move was smack. Crack. Irk. Yongjie of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave snapped the neck of a boy right next to him. You. The boys who followed Yongjie couldn't hide their consternation at the betrayal. Then Yongjie spoke in an irritated tone. Fuck. Are you going to play friendship games after coming this far? If you bastards want to live too, it's best to do as that guy says. Irk. There was no other way to deny it. Charging at that bastard Mok Jayanun would be of no use, so to survive now, they had to kill each other until only 7 remained, as he said. Swoosh swoosh. Sorry. Gasp. Why you? The other boys also strangled and ambushed the boys next to them. The boys who were even a little slow became prey. This wasn't just limited to Yonga's side. Aarg. The boys who had been scattered and defending the flag in a semicircular formation also pounced on the boys next to them, throwing caution to the wind. Swoosh. Die. Why you too? Shut up. Is this the time to argue about that? It was hard to admit, but Yongjie was right. We entered this competition killing each other anyway, so what friendship at this point? They had to survive. If they died, cooperation or friendship was of no use. They had to make it into the 7 before the sun rose. Mok Yucheon, who was supporting Mo Harang's shoulders, bit his lip at this sight. In an instant, everything felt futile. Although they weren't righteous individuals, the teammates he had shared life and death with for 3 hours to survive together had suddenly turned on each other to kill. They were the ones who had said they would stick together until the end just 2 hours ago. That's why Mok Yucheon, who had thought that people were people no matter where they were, felt that way. However. Die. Die. Ayaha. Please spare me. I helped you too. So what? They were killing each other as if nothing had happened. Everyone's eyes had changed. Grip. Mok Yucheon's tattered nails from the steel bead competition dug into his palm. All of this was because of that guy. Because of that bastard, the place where they had competed by joining forces had suddenly turned into a bloody pandemonium. He had turned everyone into beasts with only the instincts of the strong preying on the weak, not humans. He wanted to knock that guy down if he could. However. Energy points. His energy points were sealed, and it seemed like Mok Jayanun was using some strange technique. Recalling what happened at Yun Mok Sword Manor, it was probably some kind of illusion technique. Damn it. He didn't want to be dragged around by that guy, but there was no other way. For a moment, Mok Yucheon unconsciously glanced at Mo Harang, whose shoulders he was supporting. Then, as if realizing his mistake, he shook his head. No. For a fleeting moment, he had unconsciously thought about killing her. What had become of him? As he was thinking this, he saw a boy approaching with murderous eyes. Huff. Huff. Masang. Mok Yucheon called his name. He was one of the 3 who had survived with him from the beginning. At some point, Masang's hand gripped one of the 2 stone daggers that Mo Harang had. Grit. Mok Yucheon clenched his teeth. Having already stained his hands with a lot of blood on the way here, he knew well that there was no way to persuade Ma Seng in this situation. That's why he was so furious at this situation. At that moment, Ma Seng swept his surroundings while exhaling rough breaths. Then he opened his mouth. Yu Qion. Cut off Harang's breath. What? Mok Yu Qion's voice rose. Thanks to Mo Harang, they had escaped several crises, so he didn't expect Ma Seng to tell him to kill her without any hesitation. Moreover, didn't she get injured while trying to help her teammates? No. Let's leave Harang and fight each other instead. Huff. Huff. Stop talking nonsense and kill her. I said no. At Mok Yu Qion's words, Ma Seng shouted. You son of a bitch. She won't survive with her injuries anyway. In that case, even if we have to kill her, you and I should survive. With a scream close to wailing, Mok Yu Qion muttered with difficulty. I know. Damn it, I know. But he couldn't do it. He could understand fighting each other and killing someone, but he couldn't cut off the breath of this girl who was in a dazed state. Then I'll kill her. With those words, Ma Seng charged forward. At this, Mok Yu Qion hurriedly put down Mo Harang and blocked Ma Seng. The guy had already killed another boy, so he had no hesitation in killing the injured Mo Harang to survive. Swoosh swoosh. Although his energy points were sealed, Mok Yu Qion was called a genius. He threw his body towards the charging Ma Seng, grabbed his wrist with the seizing hand technique, and twisted it back. Crack. Let go of that. Mok Yu Qion urged Ma Seng to let go of the dagger gripped in his hand. If you don't let go, your arm will break. Aarg. Ma Seng. Calm down. Let's join forces and deal with the guys from the other team instead. Before he could finish his words, Ma Seng said with a sneer. Aarg. What are you going to do when the sun is rising? And even if it's not me, it's already too late. At those words, Mok Yu Qion raised his head. And there, he saw a boy charging towards Mo Harang, who was lying face down. It was also a boy who had been on the same team. The boy charging with an apologetic expression had a rock in his hand, as if he was going to shatter Mo Harang's head. Stop! Mok Yu Qion shouted urgently. But it was already too late. Nuo! The boy's crude stone was just a step away from crushing Mo Harang's head. Right at that moment. Clang! The moment the stone was about to touch, the boy's body froze in that state. This is the alien sensation of something restraining his body. It was that same thing as before. Thud. Ha. Ha. With the crisis averted at the last second, Mok Yu Qion sat on the ground and exhaled rough breaths as if hyperventilating. After being extremely tense, his breathing became uncontrollable as the tension suddenly dissipated. If he had been just a little late, Mo Harang would have died. At that moment, the boy whose movements were restrained shouted as if possessed. What are you doing? Didn't you say you'd give us a chance by fighting each other? He wasn't spouting nonsense about sparing the injured or women, right? As he was thinking this, a sound was heard. Clap clap clap. He could move his head, so when he looked in that direction, he saw Mok Jiangun clapping his hands. Wondering why he was doing that, Mok Jiangun said with a bright smile. Congratulations. What? The spots are all filled. At those words, the boy swallowed and looked around. Mok Yu Qion and Ma Seng, Mo Harang and himself who tried to kill her, and Yong Jie of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave and 2 of his cronies had survived. Ah! Forgetting how many of them had survived while trying to kill each other to reduce their numbers, they finally realized that only 7 remained. Human hearts were truly cunning. Ha! We survived. All of them who had been trying to kill each other until now had brightened expressions along with sighs of relief. They were engulfed in the exhilaration that came from surviving the competition. That exhilaration was so great that they completely forgot the fact that they had engaged in a massacre orchestrated by Mok Jiangun. Interesting. The corners of Mok Jaeongun's mouth twitched upwards. He felt a small amusement at the sight of them. At that moment, the sun was rising. The mountains of Corpse Blood Valley, which had been shaded in darkness, slowly brightened under the crimson sunlight slowly poking its head out. And with that, swish 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 swish. Before long, as if they had been waiting, warriors wearing red belts appeared, displaying their lightfoot skills. The warriors who appeared looked around, checking the flags and the survivors. Then, their expressions stiffened as they discovered something. It was because of the giant monster wolf, no, the monstrous beast demon wolf, lying dead with its snout torn off. Who on earth? This monstrous beast wasn't released to be killed. It was released for them to survive against. Chapter 72. True Meaning. Part 5. The monster wolf, no, the monstrous beast demon wolf, lying dead with its snout torn off. It wasn't released to be killed. It was released for them to survive against it. But to think it was dead. Huh. It was truly unbelievable. For a moment, everyone was at a loss for words at this sight. Then, a red-belted warrior asked the exhausted boys. Who did it? At his question, the boys' gazes naturally turned towards a certain someone. Although they all looked similar, there was one exceptionally handsome boy who was drenched in blood from head to toe. It was Mok Jaeongun. Is it that guy again? The eyes of the red-belted warriors flickered with interest. Although they were already interested in him due to his performance in the steel bead competition, they couldn't help but be surprised by this. Senior, does this make sense? One warrior muttered as if he couldn't understand. That was understandable. Even without the energy points being sealed, it seemed difficult for a decent warrior to handle a monstrous beast of that size. But to think he did this to it in a state where his energy points were blocked? No matter how much one trains their outer force, this is impossible. It was questionable whether one could face it even with proper gear. The most senior warrior among the red-belted warriors looked Mok Jaeongun up and down. While the other boys looked haggard and exhausted, he alone had lively eyes. No, he didn't even look tired. Could it be? The senior warrior's eyes narrowed with suspicion. He then spoke. You. Come here. Is there a problem? Who said you could talk back? Mok Jaeongun shrugged and approached the senior warrior. Then the senior warrior roughly grabbed Mok Jaeongun's wrist and checked the state of his body. It was to confirm whether his energy points were blocked or not. However, they're blocked. He wondered if the guy had somehow unblocked his energy points, but that wasn't the case. They were still blocked. Confirming this made it even more unbelievable. They raised such a guy in a mere place like Yeonmok Sword Manor? No matter how famous the martial arts family was, it wasn't a major faction like the Nine Paths or the likes. This was going to be quite controversial. It was the first time since the operation of Corpse Blood Valley. *****. The robe-wearing diviner looked dumbfounded at the corpse of the monstrous beast demon wolf with its snout and head torn off, completely separated from its lower jaw. To make matters worse, right when the sun rose, he had used a technique to signal the demon wolf to return. But when it didn't return, the diviner, sensing something was off, had climbed up here. Then someone spoke to him. Is this possible? Pardon? I asked if it's possible. The one asking the question was none other than the Lord of Corpse Blood Valley wearing the demon mask. Arriving late and climbing the mountain, he had received a report from the red-belted warriors and arrived here to check the demon wolf's corpse. He, too, couldn't help but be inwardly surprised. In the first place, the role of the monstrous beast demon wolf was to be an ordeal for the boys. It was to push them to an even more extreme situation and maximize their will to survive. But to think they killed it. This? Huh. The robe-wearing diviner couldn't give any answer. If a warrior who had mastered martial arts had done this, he would have at least responded, it seems he possesses quite an extraordinary martial prowess. But this was truly unexpected. Should I even mention this? What was even more troublesome was the state of the demon wolf. It had already achieved maturity. He already thought it was getting close to a mature state anyway. But he believed it wasn't ready yet and it would take a couple more months, so he had deployed this beast. However, in that short time it had become a fully mature body. It had turned from a fierce beast into a monstrous beast. This is crazy. How did they do this? Even trained diviners and third-rate or second-rate warriors had a hard time dealing with ferocious beasts. But if it became a monstrous beast level, even first-rate masters would have a hard time catching it unless they joined forces. He couldn't believe that one of the boys whose energy points were sealed had caught it. He had to report this, but the diviner couldn't bring himself to do it. That's because even ferocious beasts alone could be considered an extreme ordeal, but a monstrous beast level would be close to a massacre, even with the protective space of the flag. Should I consider it lucky? It was fortunate that this beast was killed before it could cause more harm. However, it was difficult to fully report this fact. So he excluded this and said, "To be honest, even I don't understand how they caught it." You don't understand? In your opinion, which part of the human body possesses the greatest strength? Are you trying to say it's the mouth? That's right. The biting force is the strongest. Let alone beasts or such beasts, do you think it would be any different? Those called beasts have lived wild lives unlike humans, and accordingly, they are equipped with jaws capable of chewing through even bones. Humans cut hard bones and eat them. However, many of the creatures called beasts eat bones whole. In that case, naturally, the shape of their teeth and their biting force had to develop accordingly. If they were lucky and pierced its core, which could be called its heart, with something sharp, I could understand. But this is impossible with just a bit of strength. To tear it apart, one needed a force that surpassed the biting power of the monstrous beast demon wolf. The demon mask nodded at this. I see. Who did it? Please tell me, that's enough. Pardon? Didn't you hear me? I said that's enough. Take that corpse with you. He had heard what he wanted. So there was no need to mention it further. I understand. Then I'll borrow a few men. Do as you please. As the diviner took the corpse with the help of a few warriors, the senior warrior who served as his assistant approached him with a frown and said, I checked. Are the Golden Gate locks still in place? Yes. With the energy points blocked, the true energy couldn't circulate through his body. But he did that. Calling him strong is an understatement. He might be even stronger than that child of the esoteric realm gate. Was this something that could be explained by him being strong? The demon mask had experience fighting against what was called a fierce beast in his younger days. If he referred to those memories, it was still questionable. To think he did this without inner energy. I'll have to keep an eye on him. He thought he was no ordinary fellow, but this made him even more interested. There seemed to be something about him that couldn't be explained just by his background from a famous martial arts family. The demon mask changed the subject. Have the rest all gathered? Yes. What's the total number? The total number of survivors is 259. Out of the total of 468, about half had died. Upon receiving this report from the senior warrior, the demon mask nodded and moved his feet. Climbing to the top of the mountain ridge, there was a large clearing where the boys were sitting in rows and columns. But this was just the number of survivors, they were divided into two groups here as well. Out of the 259, 200 were on the right side, and the remaining 59 were on the left side. The majority of 200 had relaxed faces, while the remaining 59 were pale and trembling. The reason was that they were the ones who failed to find a flag until sunrise. Damn it. Is this how we die? That's why they were afraid. The result had already been foretold. It was death. The demon mask, standing in front of them, opened his mouth. I congratulate you on successfully defending the flags. The 59 pieces of trash on the left side have also worked hard to survive the night without being able to do anything. Even the words that were supposed to be respectful were different. In fact, these words didn't register with the 59 boys. They just wanted to live. As they were doing so, the demon mask turned his head towards them. Thump. 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 Their hearts pounded loudly. The moment the demon mask gave the order, it seemed like the red-belted warriors would immediately behead them. However, the 59 pieces of trash follow that diviner down the mountain. At this order from him, the eyes of the 59 boys widened. They naturally thought they would be killed on the spot, but being told to follow that robe-wearing diviner down the mountain made them puzzled. Could it be that they were being spared? Murmur, murmur. The faces of these boys began to light up. Seeing this, the red-belted warriors shook their heads. Being told to follow the diviner was by no means a good thing. They didn't want to tell them what was to come, as they were so happy about briefly extending their lives. Shut up and get lost. At the demon mask scolding, the rejoicing boys shut their mouths. Of course, they were still smirking. And so, the 59 boys followed the procession, collecting the corpse of the demon wolf and the bodies of the dead, pulling a cart down the mountain. Why are they making those expressions? There must be something. Although those who went down wouldn't know, the 200 boys who roughly grasped the situation by looking at the expressions of the red-belted warriors felt fortunate that they weren't included in that group. As they were doing so, the demon mask spoke again. Now, it's time for another selection. Selection? The faces of the boys, who had been relieved at the word selection, became puzzled. Of course, not all of them were like that. Some teams were inwardly cheering as if they had guessed the situation. As they were doing so, the demon mask pointed to the left side and said, "Those who have grasped the true meaning of the flags, move to the left side." True meaning? What is he talking about? Murmur, murmur. The boys stirred. Then some of them got up from their seats. And with a triumphant expression, they moved to the left side. Of course, Mok Jaeongun's team was no exception. Seeing the boys who had moved, a few teams tried to follow suit to the left side without knowing the reason, thinking, "Oh well, I don't know." However, if you follow without knowing the true meaning and get caught, you'll be executed on the spot. Flinch. They had no choice but to stop at this warning. And so, the boys were divided into left and right sides once again. Out of the 280 boys were on the left side, and 120 boys were on the right side. What the hell is this true meaning? Does this mean we didn't pass? The 120 boys on the right side couldn't hide their anxiety. It was due to the fear that if they didn't pass here, they might die, as the term selection was used. As they were doing so, the demon mask looked at the boys remaining on the right side and said, "This is the limit for you lot. But be grateful. You lot have now become low-ranking warriors of the Heaven and Earth Society." At this declaration from the demon mask, the boys' eyes widened. They were the ones who had been afraid that they would die for failing to pass the gate. But it was a completely unexpected result. However, relieved that they wouldn't die but had survived, some of the boys sat down on the ground as if their legs had given out. We survived. Corpse Blood Valley, where most of those who entered were known to leave as corpses. The exhilaration of surviving here was too great. On the other hand, about half of them didn't seem to be in a good mood, their expressions souring. That was because, damn it, a low-ranking warrior. The goal of most of those entering Corpse Blood Valley was never to become a mere low-ranking warrior. The purpose of risking their lives to pass the gates was to be chosen. But they had failed at this. Stupid things. You took the test too simplistically. Seeing them, the 80 who had grasped the true meaning of the gates looked at them with mocking expressions. They had gained the qualifications to go to a higher place. As they were doing so, the demon mask took something out of his bosom. It was a silver tablet with the character 2 written on it. Ah! The eyes of a few, including Yong Jie of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave, sparkled upon recognizing this. It was a badge given to the one who passed the gate at the top of the class. Is he going to determine the top score? If that was the case, they couldn't help but be interested. They had prior information that having that badge would be quite advantageous in the end. But unlike the steel bead competition, there was nothing particularly superior about this one. The only thing was the fact that they had discovered there were 2 types of flags, but even this was too many with 80 people. What will he do? As they were wondering about this, the demon mask muttered, "How should I determine the top scorer? Should it be the one who memorized the verse?" At these words, a few, including Yong-Jie, perked up their shoulders. That was because they were the ones who had succeeded in memorizing the verses in advance, having secured the 2 types of flags with verses early on. If it was like that, they were confident. Or should it be the one who can best demonstrate the verse? With the following muttering, some of the perked-up shoulders sank. Although they had barely memorized the verses while defending and seizing the flags all night, they didn't have time to practice. This was the same for Yong-Jie of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave and Yun Mu-Wung of the Esoteric Realm Gate. They could immediately demonstrate the stances according to the memorized verses, but they weren't confident in demonstrating them perfectly, as it would be their first time. In fact, it would be the same for anyone. Still, the conditions are the same. If they were told to demonstrate the stances, they were going to try it no matter what. As they were doing so, the demon mask said, "Good. Let's do it this way. Is there anyone among you who can properly explain what kind of verse is on the flag?" At that question, someone raised their hand and stood up first, as if they had been waiting. Swoosh! It's a sword technique. At this shout, snickers burst out from here and there. That was because anyone who had memorized or at least seen the verse would know that it was a sword technique. Is that even worth mentioning? Just by looking at the demon mask's cold gaze, the boy realized he had made a mistake and quietly sat down. Then Yong-Jie of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave raised his hand and stood up. It's a swift sword art where offense and defense are integrated, targeting 3 acupoints on the centerline and 6 major acupoints, and the variation of stances is diverse depending on its use. At Yongga's explanation, Yun Wu-Wung of the Esoteric Realm Gate smacked his lips regretfully. The others felt the same way. He had concisely and accurately explained the characteristics of the sword technique. No further explanation was necessary. How about that? Yong-Jie of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave looked at Mok Jiangun and Yun Wu-Wung of the Esoteric Realm Gate in turn with a triumphant expression. There was no need to even look at Mo Harang of the Demon Fire Hall, as she was lying down receiving treatment. He was confident that this badge would be his. The demon mask opened his mouth. To think you figured it out to that extent in the midst of all this, not bad. Got it. Yong-Jie of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave inwardly cheered. Judging by the demon mask's reaction, what he had figured out seemed to be correct to some degree. Mok Yuchion's eyes flickered with interest. He didn't speak up first because he had no particular desire for the top spot. However, more than that, he has a keen eye for reading the verses. It was almost identical to what he had grasped. Although the guy was cunning, his talent in martial arts definitely didn't fall behind his own when compared. He became curious about what level he would be at once the Golden Gate lock were removed. As they were doing so, the demon mask glanced at the senior warrior of the captain rank. Then the senior warrior also nodded his head. In any case, these were people who had fought in the flag defense battle for nearly 3 hours without resting or sleeping, engaged in a fight to the death. It was plenty impressive that they had figured it out to this extent. The demon mask held out the silver tablet and said, "Good. This gate." Before he could even finish his words. Isn't it a sword formation rather than just a sword technique? The demon mask frowned and turned his head. Who just said that? As he was wondering, the one who said those words was none other than Mok Jiangun. Huh. At this, the demon mask clicked his tongue as if dumbfounded. That was because this sword technique had simple stances, so it was impossible to distinguish whether it could be demonstrated as a sword formation or not just by looking at the verses. At the very least, it was difficult to notice unless one was a swordsman who had reached a high level with the sword. But a greenhorn brat distinguished this just with the verses? What? Yom Jie, who had inwardly sneered at the abrupt mention of sword formation from Mok Jiangun's mouth, was taken aback. But what the hell was this reaction from the demon mask?